listening to the Starting Block Podcast. Guys, this is a show for complete athletic development. As you know, our mission, our objective here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I am with my co-host, Chris Scarborough. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Phenomenal.
There, all right. Well, without further introduction, today is a Q&A with a special guest, David Buer.
Well, as
Chris
always,
is too excited.
Well, I tell
as
you,
always, truly a pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
thanks for being here. And I was telling John, I was like, yeah, we say guest. I mean, come on, guys. David is not guest anymore. David is like, he just belongs here at this point.
I'm just the relative living in the basement now.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding.
the squatter that just won't go away.
Well, yeah, so today, like I said, guys, today's going to be Q&A, and brought David in. Let me finish up the housekeeping real quick, and we won't waste any time. We'll get to it. But, yeah, so you've got Q&A, the bi-weekly episode. Chris, where can they submit questions?
info@startingblockpodcast.com.
Then you've got another bi-weekly episode. That's our guest interview. If you haven't listened to the first 3 episodes we did with David, highly encourage you to go back and hunt those down. Those were awesome, and that's why he's back on the show. But then the final episode you'll get from us, this is about a quarterly episode, that Friday Fire episode. It's just about 20 minutes of me brain dumping, talking about something that's somewhat relevant to our industry, and something I think is important that can help us all grow. Guys, we don't run ads on the show, but we do ask that you just pay your dues and share the show if you got value out of it. If you laughed, if you learned something, all we ask is that you please just support this mission, man. Just bring us a friend, share the show. That's really all we ask. I don't think that's too much to ask in return for doing this. We pay, for all this out of our own pocket. We don't make any money off this. We're doing this to bring you guys the real shit. So I just ask that you please pay your dues and share the show and help us grow this project. So anyways, that's the show breakdown, guys. And without further ado, I think it's time to get going. But I don't know, Dave, how long has it been since I think it's been since the holidays since we all talked, hadn't it?
It's too long. Been way too long. But I'm glad we all survived the holidays.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somewhat, yeah. But no, we were talking about trying to all get together and do some recordings like that, but we just weren't able to make it happen. I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to do it this summer or something.
I think we
cool.
put up a calendar on a dartboard, throw a dart at it, whatever, wherever that dart lands is the day we have to schedule make it happen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. We talked about doing those like fireside chat type deals, and I don't know, guys. We'll still work on making that happen if we can. That'd be pretty cool. But what's new with you, David? I mean, gosh, like I said, we haven't talked in a while. But the audience hadn't heard from you either. So what's new with you, bro?
Listen, living the dream. If I was any better than how I'm doing myself, I'd be you guys. So
I don't really have a comment.
Listen. In continued pursuit of creating a more evolved and advanced species.
Well, I think our society needs that desperately. I think you're looking at it from a different area, but I definitely think we need to evolve and continue to push those boundaries, or at least stop the hemorrhaging, for where people in our country are at the moment.
Well, I think the three of us are pretty accustomed to the fact that the voluntary suffering that we put ourselves through prepares us for the involuntary suffering that inevitably life and society and circumstances and situations will put us in. So,
yeah,
right, no doubt.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to join us again, and man, let's get to it. I don't want to bullshit anymore. I just want to hear David talk.
Yep. All right, let's get to it.
This is a joint task force over here.
Absolutely. Well,
all right, what we got, Chris?
We're clearing out rooms together.
Well, it's funny because I think some of these we've already sort of answered off air. But question number 1: If ISO extremes are so slow, how can it qualify as high velocity?
All right,
that's a really good question.
Yes,
fantastic question.
Yeah, I've got the short, simple answer. David's will probably be much more profound.
All right, so let's hear yours, and then I'll kind of jump from there.
All right, so the body knows position. The brain has positional awareness, and then it's the increase in myelination. So if you don't know what myelin is, it's the insulation around a nerve fiber, essentially. And so as you maintain position and engage the appropriate muscles, you're literally contracting and relaxing muscles at the fastest alteration around a joint, and thus it helps you develop speed-ish.
Chris,
There you go.
are you
Nice.
jumping in on this?
Well, and just to just to piggyback on that, and I'll be probably even more brief, and that is I'm going to go with the rebound effect, because in essence, what I tell everyone is, say, the landing from an altitude drop, for example, the fundamental position is the iso extreme. So you're pulling in. The natural reaction to that is push away, and to push away rapidly. So you're in that iso extreme position, regardless of which exercise it is. Pulling in, push away. It should be very, very high velocity. In fact, you have almost no choice but to go at very high velocity when everything's at such length.
Absolutely. I mean, I say in extreme isometrics, the concept of high velocity isn't necessarily about the rapid movement in a traditional sense. For a person observing the activity, for example, or maybe even seeing it performed or performing it themselves for the first time. But instead, it's about the rapid firing, the contraction, the intent of the agonist, while simultaneously relaxing, or more accurately lengthening the antagonist simultaneously. This will create a high velocity neuromuscular response where the body learns to recruit more motor units and muscle fibers more effectively, proficiently, and efficiently over time. This also leads to improved energy cycling, as you guys know, and thus enhanced performance. Obviously, to the eye, they're slow, really slow and deliberate, but the neuromuscular activity within the muscles is incredibly rapid and intense, which thus is the greatest contributing factor to optimizing performance, utilizing these particular methodologies and exercises that they're paired with.
Well, I'm glad you kind of corrected there, because I think I kept using the word short and length. I'm sorry, I kept using the word on off. And David, I think it was you that corrected me on Instagram. It's like short and lengthen, not on off, right?
Yeah, because they technically never
They
fully
technically
relax,
don't shut
right?
off,
Right,
but I think
exactly.
people connect with the on-off concept a little more.
Right.
It may be poor language, but I think people just can relate to it. Even though, yeah, you're right, David, it doesn't actually happen.
Right.
But as we were discussing these questions, we were texting about these earlier this morning about what because we do, guys, like sometimes Chris will pull out questions and we're not prepared for them, and sometimes we're actually we want to make sure we give you guys good value, and we actually do prep a little bit for it. But like I said, I just want the show to be authentic and raw. But as we were texting this morning, I was thinking about something that I don't really know if anybody's ever talked about, and that is, like, when we talk about the extreme slow, or just how we develop speed through just holding position, how velocities develop. Like I said, particularly in the myelination side of things as well, it got me thinking about just its relation with fascia. And like, I've always been intrigued with fascia, and I've always attacked it in different perspectives, but the concept of like how the brain communicates with it is very interesting. And so I heard something, I don't even remember where or how long ago, but it was like the speed of like the brain to the nerve to the muscle, I think, is like 125 miles an hour. But the speed of the brain to the nerve to the fascia is like 720 miles an hour. And so, like, that just got me thinking. A lot of times muscle is like more of a stabilizer, and the production, like the force transfer and generation is through fascia. and I don't want to put words in Dan's mouth, but I feel like it was Dan that said that at some point, and I could be wrong. So Dan, if I am, I apologize. We can talk about it next time you come on. But it just got me thinking about how much fascia plays a role in this, like, velocity development when holding these positions.
Well, and we're technically not holding any position, right? It's an active pursuit of a more extreme, more vulnerable, lengthened position, right? And with the ability to create maximal intent and create such a high level of awareness and intensity that nothing else can be present. It's relayed at such speeds where it's the only thing that you can concentrate on. And that's up to the individual that's performing it, right? What they're able to get out of it, because the greater intent, the greater the focus, the greater awareness as far as the position and the execution goes, the greater intensity and stimulus that then they will have to process during that time, which then allows them to technically have all their attention in one area, right? As far as executing that exercise or activity.
Mm-hmm.
And which then can be enhanced further with a modality like an ARP wave, right? By forcing the individual to, let's say, if the pad placement is on the antagonist muscles, right?
Or the newbie.
Right. And then forcing them to have to overcome that stimulus to lengthen, overcome that the sensations associated with that, to be able to pull themselves into that greater position. And I always talk about, we want to spend all of our time, or the majority of our time, where everyone else spends the least amount of time, where everyone else is most scared to spend time, where everyone is most vulnerable, where everyone else is most uncomfortable, where everyone else is most susceptible to injury, where everyone else is weakest. That's where we want to live. Because if we can optimize our performance in that area, that's a superior human being. That's a superior athlete to the competition.
Right.
I also think the increase in the ability to develop velocity even at slow movements is also the elimination of compensation patterns.
Absolutely, because the
Yeah.
same errors we make at high velocity, we make at extreme slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
But often you'll see, actually more and more now, especially on social media, you'll see individuals posting, isometric holds, right? Or they'll post it's an ISO extreme. But what they don't realize is, if you're resisting what the body is naturally supposed to be doing and the natural processes that are supposed to take place while executing that movement, then you're creating compensation patterns while executing this exercise that you think is going to have benefit for you. But in reality, it's actually detrimental.
Give an example of that. Like, you don't have to use. We don't need to use names or anything like that. But can you give it? Because I know what you're saying, but I think for some of the listeners, I think it's important that they get a visual image of this, like with some detail. Like, what is something that you've seen recently?
Because for example, the quadriceps, right? The quadriceps acts as the antagonist in an iso extreme, right? If you do not allow it to perform its function, because its function is to bend the leg into a deeper position, right? Into a more extreme position. If you're resisting that with the quadriceps, you're basically training your body. You're training your quadriceps and your hamstrings to actively fight against each other, creating compensation patterns that then will be displayed on the playing field or in everyday life.
Right. So, I mean, we've seen this, like trying to get someone to begin to understand an altitude drop, which by the way, we're going to get into just a little preview of the next question. But that you'll see someone land and then lower,
Right.
as opposed to pulling into their landing. You see kind of they land, then they, their teeth chatter when they land, and then they lower into a squat or they lower into a push up or whatever, as opposed to making it smooth. You can
Right.
see the difference, especially if you put it at high velocity. So, yeah, no, that's the best image I have just hearing you.
Because
You know,
what's look, and we're going to actually touch on this, I think, in question 3. But it's whether it's traditional training, strength training, weightlifting, bodybuilding, functional training, or the highest levels of sports strength and conditioning on Olympic levels to professional levels to collegiate levels. What's happening is these exercises that are being used within these systems are training the athletes to become more efficient and proficient at compensating, at lengthening and shortening muscles at inappropriate times. Though they may be lifting and displacing more weight, more load, but what they're doing in the process is creating greater dysfunction and inability to then take that exercise or that strength that has been gained within the weight room. It is not applicable to a playing field. It's not applicable to everyday life, but instead it puts them at greater susceptibility to injury and setback and diminished performance. And that's what often coaches and athletes and all these magazines and posts out there and social media influencers and experts that don't know shit about shit that are preaching whatever it is they're preaching. They're just, listen, they're healthcare friend number one, ally number one,
well,
because, musculoskeletal disorders are the biggest cash cow for them.
it's insane, David. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, John and I have covered this topic. I don't know how many times, but anything where John and I have gone over, and let's pick on pitchers, John, because that's probably who we pick on the most, right?
Most
Because
of them
they are,
deserve it.
yeah, because most of them deserve it. Absolutely right, guys. If you've ever heard anything where we're addressing pain or whatever, or for that, and usually that's exactly what it is. It's just pain. It's not even an injury. It's just pain. Go back and listen to what David just said and understand why there's a lot of pain out there. It's because there's really, let's face it, if you want to get right down to it, it's a lack of coordination.
Well, listen,
You
Chris,
know,
let's take it further, right? There was a stat that I heard on ESPN the other day, and I know I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it's definitely within a few percentage points, right? They were saying that in today's day and age in the NBA, 50% of the players play 65 games or more. Whereas you take that stat to 10 years ago, right? It was up to about 80%. And if you take that stat 20 plus years ago, right, we're talking about 90%. And beyond that, we're talking about 95%. And we talk about how much more the advanced the training and the technologies are, but it's complete bullshit, because if you really look back at it,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, the average player's routine post game was, eating some bullshit, grabbing some drinks and cocktails, maybe hitting the club, having a good time, showing up to practice the next day,
look at Mickey
most
Mantle
likely
or Babe
hungover or
Ruth.
still drunk, right?
David Wells for the Yankees pitched a perfect game, hungover. Like that's actually a really funny story. I remember hearing
Whereas
it
these guys,
Mm-hmm.
are doing their recovery protocols and have their trainers and their experts and massage therapists and their nutritionists. And the reality is they can't stay on the fucking field. They can't stay on the court.
Yeah.
Their performance is subpar. They're putting up numbers in a league that doesn't play defense, right?
Oh no, you can't say that. There were only 300 points scored in the All-Star game this past weekend.
So in reality, as a society, as a species, as athletes, we have regressed right? But what we've done is we've spent more money on the bullshit that's accelerated that
Yeah,
process.
but people just have blinders on. I mean, it's common sense. All you got to do is look at it. How do things, quote unquote, get better and more advanced? Yet our athletes at the highest level are having to play less and less and less, and injuries in the youth are at an all-time high. It makes no fucking sense.
Listen,
I don't understand.
Chris. I think you're being insensitive. All right, you're being very insensitive.
I am
all
being.
right, it's called load management, and it's based on science.
God,
and I think you're not being sensitive to mental health.
You're probably right.
And that's a trigger. Listen,
I'm
that's
very
a trigger,
racist,
all right?
and I'm a bigot. You're right. Yeah.
No, the reality is it's a very, very, very sad situation. These players are being preyed on and being taken advantage of. And all this money and all these resources that they're spending towards what they think is actually going to put them in a more advanced state to be able to monetize their opportunities is actually doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you, and it just doesn't seem like there's anybody out there trying to help break that cycle. I mean, maybe other than us, and we are. That's why this show is here. That's what that's the whole thing. That's why I think we've all connected. But yeah, I agree with you. It's sad, and I'm hopeful that we can play a small role in changing that, because I do think there have been some good advancements in certain elements. Like, I think there's a time and place for surgery, right? If something is torn, it is what it is. So from that standpoint, there have been good advancements in that realm. But past that, into the training, into the recovery, the rehab, those are the areas that I think are really struggling and really creating some issues. You see these guys doing, Bosu ball squats like after a game. And I mean, it's like, are you training for the damn circus? Like, I don't understand how these people get in these positions and how these types of, where the justification is, I guess. And it's really frustrating. It's really sad to see these guys, because I do believe we live in an age where we probably have maybe some of the greatest talent, or in generational history. Like, there's some great talent out there. These guys can't stay healthy.
Without question, right? Genetically as a species, obviously, there's been massive advancement, right?
And I mean, who's 7'4" and can run like a 4'9" or whatever it is he runs? Like,
right. The advancement genetically, the advancement technology-wise, the advancement in the testing, right, has and the surgeries, right, has come a very long way, right? But the problem is the ability to address things at the root cause and to recover, rehabilitate, prepare is completely lacking. And there's also a separation of all of those things, right? Because you
were so much smoother saying that than I am. Like, that that was like butter, like, cutting through butter. Like,
well, preparation is everything. I mean, ultimately, preparation is everything, and that's where we're lacking the most.
We have to prepare to be able to recover from the stress that we are exposed to, right? And at the highest level, we want to be regenerative, right? We want to be able to recover at the same rate as we work. And I'm sure to a lot of people that's gonna fuck with their head, right? But we have capabilities within ourselves to cycle energy systems to be able to recover while still displaying high levels of execution and performance and engagement and continuously for prolonged periods of time. But unfortunately, the training and preparation that these athletes and just human beings in general that are coming up in today's day and age, they are not exposed to the right information out there. But it's very difficult to filter through all the bullshit, right? Whereas before, you actually had to put in some effort to gain knowledge and information and resources. You had to go out there and do the research and studying yourself and use logic and rational thinking. Whereas now you just have to filter through all the bullshit, and it's very difficult, right? Who do you believe? Right?
Yeah.
Who's right? Who's wrong? What's
And
accurate?
usually it's
What's
the
not
person
accurate?
with the most followers, or the best
Absolutely.
graphics. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
All smoke and mirrors.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, that was 30 minutes for question
Yeah,
one.
there we go. All right.
Listen, that sounds about right. That's how we do.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we roll. Oh.
Here we go. All right, question
All right.
2.
But on
All
a
right.
side note, though, Wimby is a freak, man. Like, that guy, holy cow. Like, to see a 7-footer move the way that he does, I mean, he's something else to watch.
Impressive, no doubt about it.
But
Without
All right.
question.
Next question. All right, so athlete is using altitude drops to increase his vertical jump. Is using a height about 6 inches above what is measured his above, using a box about 6 inches higher than his measured vertical jump. How does safely landing from a box higher than your current vertical jump, or running, say, slightly downhill, like overspeed training, how does that actually improve a vertical jump or improve your running speed?
good question. David, go for it,
I mean,
man.
it's a
Let's hear
great
your
question,
thought.
and probably the simplest answer that I could give is our body and our nervous system will only give us access to what it believes it can recover from. By pushing the body safely to handle forces and speeds, velocities beyond its current capabilities, we can stimulate adaptations that result in the ability to potentially jump higher, run faster, be quicker as far as changing direction, all of those things, right? But it's due to the fact that landing safely from a greater height requires the body to absorb and dissipate a higher amount of force that then helps prepares the muscle and tendons and ligaments involved in displaying athleticism to be more prepared. And obviously the overspeed training allows the neuromuscular system to adapt to higher speeds, making the body believe that it can recover from exposure to the greater forces at the higher velocities, the rate of speed production. And then obviously all of those things will help not only enhance the proficiency of movement, but also the efficiency of movement.
You know, one of the things that I often will bring up to athletes is, and Jay Schroeder did this to me and John in our podcast with him. He's like, did you ever have a performance that was, like out of your mind, in the zone, if you will? And, and I often bring that up to athletes and have for years, actually. It's like, do you ever recall that day where it's like, or maybe it was just one play. It might even might not have even been one game. It might not have been a whole tournament. It might have been just one play, but there was one time where, you're a pitcher and you threw the ball 100 miles an hour. You might not be able to repeat it, but you could do it once. Or that time you jumped higher than you've ever jumped before in your life. You couldn't do it again, but you did it once. So your body's capable of so much more than your brain will let it use on an everyday basis. So, my thought on something like whether it be overspeed or I guess really that the vertical jump landings or the altitude landing is a type of overspeed, is you're just training your body to get closer and closer to what it's already capable of. Be able to display what you're already capable of.
Well, look, the objective of all of this, right? And first of all, you shouldn't be progressing to the altitude drops and the overspeeds without being able to display mastery in what we just discussed previously, and that's in the ISO extremes, right? So if you're not displaying mastery, high level mastery, then you're not going to get what you're supposed to get out of the altitude drops or the rebounds. And you're going to put yourself at risk of setback along the way. So you're not only going to receive what you're supposed to receive from it, but lead yourself to potential setback. And, one of the things that all of this is based off of is returning ourselves to the original form. Because if you watch a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old run around, they don't get tired. They don't think about anything. They'll jump off of anything. They're fearless. They're not scared of anything. They'll throw, they'll catch. But what happens is over time, our hardware becomes corrupted with improper software updates. And what we have to do is restore the original software updates onto our devices so that we can then properly advance without that corruption and dysfunction that is currently in our hardware.
That's a great description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have anything else to add. I think, David, maybe we can discuss this. You and I interchange protect versus recover. That caught my attention because I usually say the same thing. Like, look, our body's only going to allow us to jump as high as it knows it can safely, protect us from in the landing. Right. Why do you like to use the word recover?
I like to use the word recover because it's our ability to be able to move on without compromise, advance without compromise, advance to the next step without compromise, wake up without being compromised, move without being compromised. So that's why I like that terminology.
Okay, so David, let me follow up on that same question just real quick before we get to question 3. So let's take somebody who threw, they usually throw they usually throw a 95 mile an hour fastball, and that's their best. All of a sudden, one time they throw 100, and it was effortless, but then they can't do it a second time. Let's say the next pitch is 95, 94, the next pitch is 95, 94, and they keep trying harder and harder. Are you saying that chances are this person who threw that 100 mile an hour fastball that one time but couldn't do it twice, it's almost like their brain knew if I allow this person to do it a second time, they will not be able to recover from it?
Yeah. So my biggest thing is it doesn't matter what you can do once, right? If you can't display it over and over and over again and recover from it, it's irrelevant because you can't call upon it. You have to be able to call upon these abilities, these capabilities naturally, automatically, on command, or for it to be an automated response in any situation or circumstance. And if it's not, then it doesn't matter. It's just like, let's say an athlete executes a 5-minute ISO extreme once. If they can't do that shit over and over and over and over and over and over again, before practice, after practice, before a particular stimulus, after a particular stimulus, if they can't call upon it every single time, then they aren't displaying mastery, right? If the athlete cannot perform it, let's say utilizing an additional neuromuscular modality, right, while performing that exercise or activity at 100, right, as the power output at any frequency, right, whether it's a 10 frequency, whether it's a 999 frequency, if they can't execute it, right, uncompromised, over and over and over again, every single time without displaying compensation patterns in the process, then they're truly not optimizing their performance. They're truly not optimizing their potential. And when they step out onto the playing field, the court, or out in the real world, in real life, they don't necessarily know how their body will respond and whether or not it is capable of displaying what they need to display in the correct circumstances, and even more so recovering from what they potentially may encounter in whatever circumstance or situation they may find themselves in.
Nice.
Displaying mastery. Before you go to the next question, Chris, I just want to touch on
Yep.
this. And it's not a question we're going to dig into today. So it's a cliffhanger, guys. We'll do a follow up on it. But the developing mastery is obviously the steps to progress within this type of training structure. And I think that's where a lot of people, and honestly, sometimes myself included, that's where some difficulty arises. And it's self-imposed on a lot of us. Now, some people are new to this and they're learning, but for others it is self-imposed because ISOs, for example, may be the proper thing to be doing. But if you keep doing ISOs nonstop and don't do anything else, your customer might not return. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, I think discussing next time we connect is discussing the progression and mastery of it is an area I'd really like to get into.
But it's also it's so critical to educate the individual that is participating and entering into the system, right? And understanding that these particular exercises and methodologies, the approaches that are used, the levels at which advancement is showcased, right, and displayed, there's a reason for it, right? And they've been selected because they will give us the greatest opportunity to evolve and adapt and advance appropriately to prepare us for that next phase, that next level, that next stimulus that we're going to be exposed to. And if we don't adhere to being disciplined and the monotony of it and the consistency of it and the at times the boredom that comes with it, and if you're not willing to overcome everything that's uncomfortable about it, you're truly not going to be able to access the beauty that could potentially come from it. And that's what often is lost because people do not spend enough time within these these fundamental areas to truly get and receive what they're supposed to get out of it so that they can evolve in ways that they could have never, ever, ever dreamed of.
I agree.
Great point.
I agree. All right. Let's hit question 3 because I know we got to wrap this up.
All right. So, David, this one is specific for you. Elijah got stronger in the weight room, even though he didn't lift for a period of time. That's according to Elijah in our previous interview. Go back and listen to it. I forget which episode it is. This is a high school baseball and basketball player. In your opinion, should we lift at all? Is lifting optional? Or at what point would you start lifting?
So I'm going to revert back to kind of everything that we've talked about leading up to this, right?
I was about to say, I think we've already answered that question.
Right. Unless they've displayed mastery. And then if we're going to talk about lifting, strength training, Olympic lifting, sports performance conditioning, function, whatever you want to call it, whatever it is, right? You have to take into consideration that all of these systems and the way that these athletes are being trained is in ways that creates these compensation patterns, this dysfunction that leads to short-term, long-term injuries, setback, and diminished performance, right? So my thing is, why do anything traditional when you know what the potential outcome of it is, right? So unless they're able to display mastery in all of the phases that are necessary, one, they shouldn't be exposed to traditional lifting, in my opinion. And two, even when they're advanced enough to be able to incorporate loaded activities, they shouldn't be done in a traditional sense, because the traditional sense has already shown us what it could potentially lead to with how, all the dysfunction and issues that all of the current athletes at the highest level are examples of right now.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. So in other words, basically, it's like go back and listen to question 1 and 2.
Yeah, I
Your
mean,
answer
I
question
mean,
3.
that's
It's
that's the reality, right? Because if it's all about proper preparation for the potential stimulus that you're going to be exposed to, and having access to more motor units and muscle fibers, being able to more proficiently and efficiently cycle energy systems, the ability to be stronger and more efficient and proficient in the weakest, most vulnerable positions, which, here's the thing, it doesn't matter if you've successfully executed a 5-minute iso extreme lunge, because one, there's no perfections, right? We're humans, right? We're work in progress. We're looking to unlock and access more. But what people don't realize, and this is something, unless you've exposed yourself to it yourself completely, unless you yourself are executing the programs and the system and the methodologies day in and day out yourself, there is no way that you could potentially comprehend what you're supposed to feel and supposed to get out of it as a practitioner, as a coach, as a trainer, any of those things, right? So it's something that, whether it's a practitioner or a high-level athlete, every single time that you execute one of these extreme exercises, you're supposed to figure out how to get more out of it, how to amplify the stimulus even more, how to be even more precise with your execution, with the position, with your thoughts, with your intent, with the lengthening and the shortening of the muscle groups, right? And the way that they're firing, and your ability to stabilize and concentrate and focus and be aware in the positions, all of those things. So it never actually gets easier. Actually, the more advanced you get, the more difficult it becomes, because you yourself have a neuromuscular modality and current running within your system that you can direct and redirect and apply to amplify that stimulus, as long as you're willing to get out of your own way and deal with the potential fear and discomfort associated with it. If there's not a level of anxiety and fear and being scared of what's ahead to come within the training program or the exercise or the activity, then it's probably not going to move the needle for you.
good point. Yeah.
Excellent point. Excellent answer. Chris, you got anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, yeah. First of all, so David had challenged me a while back to do 3-4 sessions a day of. This was lunges, I think specifically. I think I did. I made it to 2 5-minute sessions per side. But yeah, but one of the things that you have brought to my attention today, David, and I think you actually have said it in the past, and that is, you know, do it, alter the environment or alter the stimulus around you. Use a modality, use the ARP or the newbie, use the go without it. Try to try to become more vulnerable, get in a more vulnerable position. Um, uh, and let's face it, the only reason why I haven't done it a third set in a given day is laziness. Really. I mean, if you want to get right down to it, it's laziness. Who doesn't have time to do an iso extreme lunge? No, but if you, no, it's too uncomfortable.
Well, it's scary, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So that very fact of, the very fact that I'm scared of it now. Okay, perfect. Do it. Do it anyway.
we are our own greatest enemy, right? Or our own, greatest adversary.
Right.
We are human beings are best at sabotaging ourselves, and the less we sabotage ourselves, the greater beauty we are exposed to that life has to offer.
Very well put. I think we end on that note right there. Well done. Guys, again, anytime David comes on, there is no way that you didn't get a immense amount of value out of this. Guys, share the show, tag us in it, tag David in it. I hope this answered a lot of questions for you guys, and I think it probably did. I think there's a few more that we continue to get that, we'd like to bring David back on, and we'll tackle again. But in essence, guys, take the information and apply it, all right? Feel free to tag us in it, and, let's help spread this message and keep growing. We're making change across the world, guys, as we kind of said in this show. That's the objective here. Cut through all the bullshit and bring you guys the real shit. So there you go, guys. David, it's a pleasure, bro, as always. That's the show, guys.